Learn English. English without memorizing grammar rules. In a small, quiet town, there lived a young man who had a dream that felt too big for his surroundings. Every evening, as the sun slowly disappeared behind dusty rooftops, he would sit by his window, with a worn-out English book in his hands. The pages were filled with rules, tenses, structures, and long explanations that made his head heavy. He tried to memorize everything. Present perfect, past continuous, future perfect. He repeated them again and again, hoping that one day fluency would magically appear. But it never did. Instead, he grew more frustrated with each passing day. One night, after hours of struggling with grammar rules, he closed the book and whispered to himself, "Why is this so hard?" He knew the rules, but when he tried to speak, his mind went blank. Man words did not come naturally. Sentences broke before they could even form. It felt like trying to walk while thinking about every single step. Impossible and exhausting. The next morning, something unexpected happened. While walking through the local market, he overheard two children laughing and speaking in English. Their sentences were not perfect. Their grammar was not always correct, but they were speaking freely, confidently, and without fear. He stopped and listened carefully. There was no hesitation in their voices. No memorized rules. Just natural conversation. That moment changed everything. He went home, but instead of opening his grammar book, he did something different. He turned on a simple English video. At first, he did not understand everything. In fact, he understood very little. But he kept listening. He paid attention to how words sounded, how sentences flowed, how expressions were used in real situations. He stopped worrying about rules and started focusing on meaning. Days passed. Then weeks. He began to notice something new. Without trying to memorize, he started recognizing patterns. He could predict what someone might say next. He began repeating phrases, not rules. He copied the way people spoke instead of analyzing why they spoke that way. And slowly, without even realizing it, his English began to grow. One evening, he met an old friend who greeted him in English. Normally, he would panic, searching his memory for the correct grammar. But this time, something was different. The words came naturally. Not perfectly, but smoothly. He responded without overthinking. For the first time, he felt what real communication felt like. He smiled, not because his grammar was perfect, but because he was understood. From that day, his learning style completely changed. He surrounded himself with English in simple ways. He listened to stories, watched conversations, spoke to himself, and practiced daily life sentences. He made mistakes, many mistakes, but he no longer feared them. Mistakes were no longer failures. They were signs that he was learning. He realized a powerful truth that many people never discover. Language is not learned by memorizing rules. It is learned by using it, feeling it, and living it. Think about how a child learns to speak. A child does not open a grammar book. A child listens, repeats, and slowly builds understanding. That same natural process works for anyone, at any age. As months passed, the young man became more confident. He could hold conversations, express his thoughts, and understand others more clearly. People started asking him, "How did you improve your English so fast?" And his answer was always simple. "I stopped memorizing grammar, bandy, and I started learning naturally." His journey was not perfect, but it was real. And that is what made the difference. If you are sitting with heavy grammar books, feeling stuck and confused, Remember this story. You do not need to memorize every rule to speak English. You need exposure, practice, and patience. Let the language come to you naturally, just like it does in real life. Listen more. Speak more. Think less about rules. Because fluency is not built in your memory. It is built in your experience. The young man's journey did not end there. In fact, that was only the beginning of a deeper transformation. As he continued to learn English in a natural way, he started noticing small but powerful changes in his daily life. Words that once felt strange slowly became familiar. Sentences that once seemed impossible began to form effortlessly in his mind, created simple habits. Every morning, instead of opening a grammar book, he would listen to short English conversations while drinking tea. At first, he only understood a few words, but he did not stop. He trained his ears to accept confusion as part of learning. He stopped expecting perfection and started accepting progress. One day, he decided to speak out loud, even if no one was there to listen. He stood in front of a mirror and described his day in English. His sentences were broken, his pronunciation was not perfect. Sometimes he forgot basic words, but he continued. He laughed at his mistakes instead of feeling ashamed of them. At first, it felt uncomfortable. His voice sounded unfamiliar. His confidence was weak. But something inside him kept pushing forward, a quiet belief that this time, he was doing it the right way. Weeks later, something surprising happened again. While watching a video, he realized he understood almost everything without subtitles. He paused the video and smiled, not out of pride, but out of disbelief. Man, this was the same person who once struggled to understand even simple sentences. He began to trust the process. Instead of translating every sentence into his own language, he started thinking directly in English. It was slow at first, like walking through a thick fog. But gradually, the fog began to clear. Thoughts became faster. Words came more naturally. He also started using English in real situations. He greeted people, asked simple questions, and even made small conversations. Sometimes people corrected him, bold. Sometimes they did not understand him. But he did not stop. Every interaction became a lesson. One evening, while sitting under the open sky, he reflected on his journey. He remembered the days when he felt stuck, overwhelmed by grammar rules that never seemed to help. He realized that his biggest mistake was not failing to learn English, but trying to learn it in the wrong way. Language was never meant to be memorized like formulas. It was meant to be experienced. He understood that grammar is not useless, bombed, but it is not the starting point. It is like learning the rules of a game before you have even played it. Without real practice, rules have no meaning. Mains. But when you play, when you listen, when you speak, those rules begin to make sense, naturally. As time passed, he became someone others looked up to. Lambda people came to him for advice. They asked him how they could improve their English. He did not give them long lists of rules or complicated explanations. Instead, he shared his story, Land. He told them to listen every day, even if they do not understand everything. He told them to speak without fear, even if they make mistakes. He told them to enjoy the process instead of chasing perfection. Manja, do not wait to be perfect before you start speaking, he would say. Speak first, and perfection will follow slowly. His words were simple, but they carried truth. Moaned. Many people who followed his advice started seeing changes in their own lives. They felt lighter, more confident, and more motivated. They no longer saw English as a difficult subject, munja. They began to see it as a skill that grows with use. And the young man, who once sat by his window feeling lost and frustrated, now sat there with a sense of calm, not because he knew everything, feigned, but because he finally understood how learning truly works. If you are on the same path, remember this: you do not need to carry the heavy burden of memorizing every grammar rule. You need to open your mind, your ears, and your voice. Let yourself make mistakes. Let yourself learn slowly. Let yourself enjoy the journey. Because in the end, fluency is not about knowing every rule. It is about being able to express who you are, clearly and confidently, in a language that once felt impossible. And that is something no grammar book alone can ever teach. As the seasons changed, the young man's connection with English grew stronger, but not in the way he once imagined. It was no longer something he studied. It became something he lived. The language slowly blended into his daily routine, like sunlight, entering a room without asking for permission. Momja. He began to notice English in places he had never paid attention to before. On signboards, in mobile apps, in songs playing softly in the background of shops. Monda. Instead of ignoring these moments, he embraced them. Every small interaction became a chance to learn, not through effort, but through awareness. Mud. One afternoon, while sitting in a small cafe, he overheard a group of travelers speaking English. Their accents were different. Their styles were different. Some spoke fast, others slow. Yet they understood each other perfectly. That moment opened his eyes to something important. English was not about sounding perfect. It was about connecting with people. Bendy. He went home and tried something new. He started shadowing. He would play a short audio clip and repeat it immediately, copying the tone, rhythm, and emotion. Danged. At first, he felt silly. But soon, he realized that this simple practice was powerful. His pronunciation improved. His confidence increased. And most importantly, speaking started to feel natural. Days turned into months, and his fear of speaking disappeared almost completely. He no longer paused to think about tenses or sentence structure. Instead, he focused on what he wanted to say. Menged. The language followed his thoughts, not the other way around. One evening, he received a message from someone in another country who wanted to practice English with him. In the past, he would have ignored such an opportunity out of fear. But this time he accepted. Their first conversation was not perfect. There were pauses, misunderstandings, and moments of silence. But there was also laughter, curiosity, and connection. After the call ended, he sat quietly for a moment. He had just spoken English with someone from another part of the world. Beans. Not as a student struggling with rules, but as a person sharing thoughts and experiences. It was a simple conversation, but it felt like a huge achievement. He realized that language is a bridge, not a test. From that day, he became even more consistent. He created small challenges for himself. One day, he would describe everything he saw around him in English. Another day, he would think only in English for a few hours. Sometimes, he would imagine conversations in his mind, preparing himself for real situations. He did not rush. He did not compare himself to others. He focused only on moving forward, step by step. People around him started noticing the change. They saw how comfortably he spoke, how naturally he expressed himself. Some were surprised, others inspired. Many asked him the same question again and again. Which grammar book did you use? And he would smile gently before answering. I used Real Life, Mlad. His answer often confused people at first, but those who truly listened understood what he meant. Real conversations, real listening, real practice. That was his method. He also learned something deeper along the way. Confidence does not come from knowing everything. It comes from accepting that you do not need to know everything to communicate. One quiet night, he returned to the same window where his journey had begun. The old grammar book was still there, covered in a thin layer of dust. Mond. He picked it up, flipped through a few pages, and then placed it back down. Not with anger or frustration, but with understanding. He finally saw it for what it was. A tool, not a solution. Und. He looked outside at the calm night sky and smiled. The same person who once felt stuck and hopeless had now found a path that worked. Ordinary. Not a perfect path, but a real one, you know. And if his story could reach even one person who feels lost in the same way, then it would be worth telling again and again. Then it would be worth telling again and again. So if you are listening to this, sitting somewhere with doubts in your mind, remember this simple truth. You do not need to memorize endless rules to speak English. You need to experience it, practice it, and allow yourself to grow with it. Speak even when you are unsure. Listen even when you do not understand everything. Keep going, even when progress feels slow. Because one day, without even realizing it, you will look back and see how far you have come. And in that moment, you will understand that the secret was never in memorizing grammar. The secret was in never giving up. Mond. Time continued to move forward, and with it, the young man's journey took on an even deeper meaning. English was no longer just a skill he was trying to build. It became a part of his identity, something that shaped how he saw the world and how he connected with it. One day, he decided to challenge himself in a way he had never done before. He started recording short videos of himself speaking in English. At first, it felt uncomfortable. He would start a sentence, stop midway, forget words, and sometimes even laugh at himself. Many times, he deleted the recordings before anyone could see them. But something inside him told him to keep going. So he made a promise to himself. He would post one video, no matter how imperfect it was. When he finally uploaded it, his heart raced. He kept checking for reactions, worried about what people might say. Boned hours passed, then a day. Slowly, a few people watched it. Some liked it, some ignored it. But one comment changed everything. Someone wrote, "Your English is not perfect, but I understand you. Keep going." He read that line again and again. Not perfect, but understood. That was all that mattered. From that day, he continued posting regularly. Samda. Each video became slightly better than the last. Not because he studied more grammar, but because he practiced more communication. Wand. He listened to himself, noticed his mistakes, and improved naturally. As his confidence grew, so did his audience. People from different places began following his journey. Many of them felt exactly the way he once felt. Pratyuvor, confused, stuck, and afraid of making mistakes. They saw themselves in him. And that connection made his voice even more powerful. He started sharing simple advice through his videos. Not complicated lessons, but real experiences. He told them to stop overthinking. He encouraged them to speak daily, even if it was just a few sentences. He reminded them that mistakes are not enemies, but teachers. One day, he received a message from a viewer who said, "I started speaking English because of you. I was scared before, but now I try every day." He paused after reading it. For a moment, he said nothing. Then a quiet smile appeared on his face. That message meant more than any number of views or likes. It showed him that his journey was no longer just about himself. It was helping others move forward too. Believed. He realized that when you learn something the hard way, you gain more than just knowledge. You gain understanding, and understanding has the power to guide others. Mumdia's time went on. His speaking became smoother, his vocabulary expanded, and his listening skills sharpened. But he never forgot where he started. He never forgot the confusion, the frustration, and the feeling of being stuck. That memory kept him humble. One evening, during a live session, someone asked him a question. Janda, do I need to learn grammar to speak English fluently? He paused for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Then he said, grammar can help you improve. Mundia, but it should not stop you from starting. Do not wait to understand everything before you speak. Speak first, learn along the way, and grammar will make sense later. Mond. His answer was simple, but it carried the weight of his entire journey. He had finally reached a point where English no longer felt like a foreign language. Manja. It felt like a second voice inside him, one that he could use freely without fear. And yet, he never claimed to be perfect, because he understood something that many people misunderstand. Fluency is not the end of learning. It is just the beginning of a new level. There were still new words to discover, new expressions to learn, and new ways to improve. But now, he welcomed that growth instead of fearing it. One night, he looked back at his very first video. His voice was shaky. His sentences were simple. His confidence was loud. But there was something beautiful in that imperfection. It was the beginning of everything. He did not delete it. Instead, he kept it as a reminder. A reminder that progress is not about being perfect from the start. It is about starting, continuing, and never giving up. So if you are watching this, wondering if you should begin your journey, the answer is simple. Start now. Do not wait for perfect grammar. Do not wait for complete confidence. Do not wait for the right moment. The right moment is already here. Speak with what you know. Learn from what you do not know. And trust that, with time, effort, and patience, your English will grow in ways you cannot imagine. Because the truth is, you do not learn English by memorizing rules. You learn English by living it, one sentence at a time. Years passed, and the young man who once struggled to say a single sentence in English was no longer the same person. Lind. But what surprised him most was not how much he had improved. It was how naturally everything had changed without forcing it. He no longer thought of English as a subject. It had become a habit of thinking, like an inner voice that quietly supported him in daily life. When he woke up in the morning, simple thoughts appeared in English. Monde. When he walked outside, he would describe things in his mind without trying. It was no longer learning in the traditional sense. It was absorption. Mdi. One day, he visited a place where he met many new people from different backgrounds. Some spoke English fluently. Some spoke with broken sentences, and some were still learning. In the past, this situation would have made him nervous. He would have worried about mistakes, grammar, and pronunciation. But now, he felt calm. He joined conversations freely. Sometimes he made errors, sometimes he searched for words, but he never stopped speaking. And something interesting happened. People did not judge him for his mistakes. They responded to his meaning. They understood his ideas. Communication was happening naturally. That was the moment he understood something very deeply. People do not connect through perfect grammar. They connect through clear expression and confidence. Later that night, he sat alone and thought about his entire journey again. He remembered the frustration of memorizing endless rules. He remembered the fear of speaking. He remembered the silence when words would not come out, and he also remembered the turning point when he decided to stop. Learning in a forced way and start learning in a natural way. Everything changed after that decision. He realized something important that many learners never discover. Grammar is not the enemy, not grammar itself. The problem is relying on it too early instead of developing comfort with the language. First, he thought about how children learn. They do not analyze sentences. They do not study tense charts. They listen, copy, repeat, and slowly build understanding through experience. That is exactly what he had unknowingly started doing. And that was why it worked. The next morning, he decided to share something different with his audience. Not another lesson, not another rule, but a message from his experience. He told them that learning English is not about collecting knowledge. It is about building familiarity. The more you listen, the more natural it becomes. The more you speak, the more confident you grow. And the more mistakes you make, the more you improve. He explained that fluency is not a sudden achievement. It is a slow transformation that happens when you stop fearing the language. He said, "Do not try to control English. Let it enter your life naturally." His words reached many people, especially those who felt stuck in the same place he once was. They began changing their approach. Some started listening more. Some started speaking without fear. Some stopped worrying about grammar and started focusing on communication. And slowly, they began to improve. Not because they found a magic rule, but because they changed their mindset. Months later, he received a message from someone who said, "I stopped memorizing grammar like you said. Now I speak every day. I am not perfect, but I am improving." He smiled when he read it, because he knew that feeling. The feeling of real progress. Not fast, not perfect, but real. One evening, he returned once again to his old grammar book. This time, he did not feel pressure or confusion. He felt gratitude. That book had once been part of his struggle, but it was no longer the path he followed. Wutchakaim Asif. He gently closed it and placed it on the shelf. Then he looked out of the window, the same window where everything had started. The world outside looked the same, but he was different now. Not because he had memorized everything, but because he had experienced everything, and in that quiet moment he understood the truth clearly. Learning English is not about memorizing rules to speak. It is about speaking so that rules become clear naturally. So if you are still struggling, still waiting for the perfect time, still afraid of mistakes, remember this journey. You do not need perfect grammar to start speaking. You only need courage to begin. Because fluency does not come from memorization. It comes from practice, patience, and the decision to never give up speaking. As his journey continued, something even deeper began to happen. Something he did not expect when he first decided to stop memorizing grammar rules. Moaned English. Stopped feeling like a separate language he was learning, and started becoming a way he experienced life itself. He noticed it in small moments. While watching a movie, he no longer needed subtitles all the time. While listening to people speak, he could catch the meaning, even if he did not understand every single word. Blenja. His mind had started focusing on ideas instead of translations. And that was the real shift. One afternoon, he met someone who was just beginning their English journey. That person was exactly where he used to be, confused, overwhelmed, and frustrated with grammar rules. They asked him, "How long did it take you to become fluent?" Yo. He thought for a moment before answering honestly. "It did not happen in one moment," he said. "It happened slowly, when I stopped trying to be perfect and started trying to communicate." The person looked surprised. They expected a secret method, a shortcut, or a special book. But there was none. There was only practice. Mond. That night, he reflected on how many people believe English fluency is a fixed goal, something you reach after memorizing enough rules. Mond. But in reality, he realized fluency is not a destination. It is a habit that grows stronger every day. You use the language. The more you use it, the more natural it becomes. Mand. He remembered how he used to freeze when someone spoke to him in English. His mind would search for rules instead of meaning. But now, he responded without hesitation. Mind. Not because he knew every grammar structure, but because he trusted his ability to express himself. That trust changed everything. Over time, he also began to notice something powerful about mistakes. Earlier, mistakes used to feel like failure, like feedback. Now every wrong sentence taught him something. Every awkward moment showed him what to improve. He stopped avoiding mistakes and started welcoming them. One day, during a conversation, he made a clear grammatical error. He realized it immediately. In the past, this would have made him stop speaking altogether. But this time, he simply corrected himself and continued talking. The other person did not even focus on the mistake. The conversation moved forward naturally. That was when he fully understood it. Communication is more important than correctness. As his confidence grew, he began helping others more actively. Manja. Not by teaching grammar rules, but by encouraging real practice. He would tell learners to listen to simple English every day, to repeat sentences they hear, to speak without fear, and to accept imperfection as part of learning. He often said, "Do not wait until you are ready. Start, and you will become ready." Manjas. People who followed this approach began seeing results. Some improved slowly, but all of them improved naturally because they were using the language instead of analyzing it. Years after his own journey began, he looked back and saw a clear pattern. Everyone who struggled was focused on memorizing too much. Everyone who improved was focused on using the language more. That was the difference. One evening, sitting quietly, he realized something even more meaningful. English had not just given him a skill. It had given him confidence, patience, and a new way of thinking. It had changed how he approached challenges in life. He no longer feared difficulty. He understood that everything becomes easier with consistent exposure and practice. And before sleeping that night, he thought about the people still struggling with grammar books. still afraid to speak, still waiting for the perfect method. If only they knew, he thought, that the perfect method is simple. Use the language. Speak it. Listen to it. Make mistakes with it. Improve through it. Nothing more, nothing less. And just like that, his journey came full circle. From confusion to clarity. From memorization to communication. From fear to confidence. Mood. But if there was one thing he would tell every learner, it would be this. You do not need to master grammar first to start speaking English. Fend. You need to start speaking English to naturally understand grammar, because fluency is not built in silence. It is built in practice. As time moved forward, the young man's message slowly spread beyond his small circle. More and more learners began to discover a simple truth, through his story. English was not as difficult as they had been told. Mood. The difficulty was not in the language itself, but in the way they were trying to learn it. Many of them had spent years memorizing rules, filling notebooks with tense charts, maimed, and trying to perfect sentences before ever speaking them. Yet when they tried to talk, their minds went blank, just like his once did. But now, something was changing. Bland. People were beginning to experiment with a different approach. They started listening more than reading rules. They started speaking even when they were unsure. Tomberda. They started focusing on meaning instead of perfection. And slowly, their confidence began to grow. The young man often received messages from learners around the world. One message said, I used to be afraid of speaking English, but now I talk every day, even if I make mistakes. Another said, I finally understand what you meant. Grammar was never the problem. Fear was. Every message reminded him of his own past. One evening, he sat alone and thought about how far he had come from. That version of himself who once stared at grammar books in frustration. Back then, he believed fluency belonged only to people who memorized everything perfectly. Now, he knew the truth. Fluency belongs to those who are willing to use the language, not just study it. Banked, he remembered how heavy learning once felt. Every sentence was a calculation. Every conversation felt like a test. But now, speaking felt light, natural, almost automatic, and that change did not come from studying harder. It came from letting go of perfection, letting go of fear, letting go of the idea that mistakes are something to avoid at all costs. One day, he decided to revisit a simple exercise he once struggled with. He tried to explain his entire daily routine in English without stopping. In the past, this would have taken him a lot of effort and hesitation. But now, words flowed easily. Not perfectly, but clearly enough to be understood. He smiled quietly to himself. This is what progress feels like, he thought. Not sudden perfection, but gradual ease. Later, he met a group of new learners who were still stuck in the same place he once was. They asked him for advice again. Hoping for something complicated or advanced. But his answer remained simple. Do not wait to understand everything. Start with what you already know. Speak it. Repeat it. Use it in real life. That is how English becomes natural. Some of them looked uncertain. It sounded too simple to be true. But those who tried it began to see results within weeks. Not because they studied more, but because they finally started using the language. And that was the turning point for many of them. lemmed. The young man realized something important about learning that no grammar book had ever taught him. Growth does not happen in silence. It happens in action. You cannot think your way into fluency, layman. You have to speak your way into it. One night, he thought about the version of himself who used to believe he was bad at English. And he now understood that he was never bad. He was just overthinking. He was waiting for perfection before practice, instead of practicing his way into improvement. That misunderstanding had held him back for years. But once he changed his approach, everything changed with it. Now, whenever someone told him, "I am not good at English," he would gently correct them. "You are not bad at English," he would say. "You are just not using it enough yet." That simple shift in thinking changed how people approached learning. Months turned into years, and his message remained the same, simple and clear. Speak more. Think less about rules. Focus on communication. Accept mistakes. Improve naturally. And slowly, learners who followed this mindset began to transform. Not into perfect speakers, but into confident communicators. One evening, he stood by the same window where his journey began, mummed. The world outside looked familiar, but his perspective was completely different now. English no longer felt like a challenge. It felt like a tool that had unlocked new opportunities, new friendships, and a new version of himself. He realized that learning English without memorizing grammar, rules, was never about ignoring grammar, mland. It was about experiencing language first and understanding structure later. And that was the truth he wished more learners could see. Because the real secret was never hidden in books, Mumdast. It was hidden in practice, patience, and the courage to speak before you feel ready. As his journey deepened even further, something unexpected began to happen. Munda. English was no longer just a skill he used to communicate. It started shaping how he thought, how he reacted, and even how he understood the world around him. Mons. He noticed that his thinking had become faster, more flexible. Earlier, he used to translate every thought from his native language into English before speaking. That process used to slow him down, but now, thoughts appeared directly in English, without translation. It was not something he forced. It happened naturally after years of exposure and practice. One day, while sitting in a park, he observed people around him. Children playing, friends talking, strangers passing by. And in his mind, he was describing everything in English without effort. Lond. Not studying, not analyzing, just observing and expressing. That moment made him realize how far he had come. He remembered the early days when even simple sentences felt like climbing a mountain. Every word had to be carefully chosen. Every sentence had to be mentally checked against grammar rules. It felt slow, artificial, and exhausting. But now, everything felt fluid. He understood something very important in that moment. Fluency is not when you stop making mistakes. Fluency is when mistakes no longer stop you. That realization changed how he guided others. He began telling learners that perfection is not the goal. Progress is if you can express your idea even imperfectly, you are already moving forward. Waiting for perfect grammar only delays communication. One afternoon, he met a student who said, "I understand English, but I cannot speak it." He smiled because he had heard this many times before. He replied, "You are waiting for permission from grammar, but grammar is not the gatekeeper of speech." practice is that student looked confused at first, but then something clicked. The next time they met, that same student was speaking more freely, not perfectly, but confidently. Mend. That small change was enough to start real progress. As time passed, the young man also began to notice something else. People often overcomplicated language learning. They believed fluency required special talent or advanced intelligence, but in reality, it required consistency and exposure. He often compared it to learning how to ride a bicycle. No one reads theory books for years before riding. They try, they fall, they adjust, and eventually they learn. Language works the same way. Practice first, perfection later. One evening, while reviewing messages from learners, he came across a question that made him pause. What is the fastest way to become fluent in English? Meand. He thought carefully before responding, because he knew many people expected a shortcut. But there was no shortcut, so he replied with honesty, the fastest way is to stop searching for the fastest way. Mummed. Start using English every day. Even small practice is enough if it is consistent. That answer was not what people usually wanted to hear, but it was the truth that worked. He had lived it himself. Later that night, he reflected on how different his life had become. English had opened doors he never imagined. Conversations with people from different countries. New ideas, new opportunities, new confidence in expressing himself. But the most valuable change was internal. He was no longer afraid of not being perfect. That fear had once controlled him. It had stopped him from speaking, from trying, from growing. But once he let go of that fear, everything else became easier. Mandarin. He understood now that confidence does not come before speaking. It comes after speaking again and again until fear slowly disappears. Before going to sleep, he thought about all the learners still struggling with grammar, rules, still waiting for the right time to start speaking. If he could speak to them directly, he would say one thing. You do not need to master English before using it. You master English by using it. Speak today, even if it is simple. Listen today, even if you understand little. Repeat tomorrow. Improve the day after. That is the real path. Because fluency is not built in theory. It is built in real life, one conversation at a time.